Hi, I'm Mary Jo Webster. This is the second out of 3 videos that are going to show you how to use the ESPNScrapeR package to get NFL data. Here we go. If you shut down our studio since watching the first video, just a reminder that you need to run all the chunks above here. We're going to start at about line 206. So really, if you need to rerun it, an easy thing to do is put your cursor on this the last one we ran, where we saved the data frame or the ggplot, and go up to the run menu and say run all chunks above. And what it'll do is just start at the top of the script and it'll run everything down and reload everything for you, so you're matching where I'm at. So here we're going to start at start of second video. So in the previous video, we just got one game, that probability data and that play-by-play data for just one game. In this video, I'm going to show you how to get it for a whole bunch of games. Of course, you could try to get it for every game if you want in a season, but I'm going to limit it down to just my favorite team, the Vikings, and we're going to get those. So remember that those functions require you to feed a game ID number into the function. So we need a list of game ID numbers, and then we can use a tidyverse package called PER to essentially loop through and go through each game ID in the list and go get all that data and then put it all together in one nice tidy package. So you can do this all at one time. I'm going to show you how to do it in 2 steps just to kind of simplify things for you. So we're going to start by making a list of the game IDs that we want. And so remember, we made a data frame of just the Vikings games previously, so I can just rely on that. Otherwise, you could refer to the full games data frame and then filter it to only the ones where either the home team or the away team is the team that you want. The key here is at the end, it says pull game ID, and what's going to happen is it's just going to grab those game IDs, and that's all it's going to return into this list that I'm naming Vikings _ game IDs. So if I run this little chunk right here, you'll see now over on the upper right, we now have a list of values. It's not a data frame like the other things we made, it's just a list, and they're all just there. So we can now refer to that list in our next piece of code. So all of those game IDs, we're going to refer to that right here in this code. So we're saying use those game IDs, and the pipe there is essentially, and then use this function from PER to loop through get ESPN win probability. That's that same function we used previously, but you'll see here the syntax is very, very different because we're looping. And that loop then is going to come and make us a data frame called Vikings games win probability. Here we go. It's going to take a little while. Okay, I spared you having to sit here. That took probably 30 seconds at least to run. So be prepared. So now we have a new Vikings games win probability data frame. And if you remember when we grabbed that other win probability data, it was pretty basic, just IDs and those percentages, the play ID numbers, game ID numbers, not a lot here, right? So let's go here and we will join that game information. Remember, we have like the names of the teams and where it was played and the score and all that kind of thing. We have those things in either the games data frame, or in this case we'll use the Vikings games data frame. And what I'm telling is just to, from the Vikings games data frame, only pull a handful of the columns that we care about: the ID, the game date, the matchup name, the home and away names, and whether or not the home team won. It's just a 1 or a 0 to indicate whether they won or not. That's the only indicator of who won. And then we're going to join it based on game ID. So I'm going to run this. And now we have, I overwrote the previous data frame, So now if we open this up, you'll see that it does have a lot more information over here about each game. Okay, so now what can we do with this? Well, let's start by, remember when we made that chart before for the Vikings-Bills game, we only needed to use that away win percentage to make that plot on what the Vikings' chances of winning the game was on a play-by-play basis. Well, now because we have 12 games, sometimes the Vikings were the home team, sometimes they were the away team, and so their win percentage is in a different column depending on the game. So I'm going to make a new column called Vikings_prob that will grab the correct percentage depending on whether they were the home team or not. So this uses the case when function from the dplyr package, and it just says if the home team name is Vikings, then grab home win percentage, and then for all others, that's what this true means, then grab the away win percentage. It's an if statement if you've ever done those in Excel or Google Sheets. It's just a if then. If this is true, do this. If not, do that. And you can have more complicated if statements if you want. But now we should have a new column there showing that win percentage. There we go. So the Vikings win probability is now here for each play in all 12 games. Okay, so now let's repeat that same process, but this time with the play-by-play data. You'll see that the syntax is the same, except this time we're telling it to use the function get NFL PBP. And it's going to use those same game IDs, and it's going to put it in a new data frame that I've given a new name. Okay, that one took several minutes. I spared you by pausing. So now we have that play-by-play, 2,129 observations. As we looked at this earlier, there's a lot of information here about every play, but we're going to focus in on a couple of cool things that we can use it for. So now, if we put that probability data with the play-by-play data, remember we already put the game information with the probability, so that we already have that. Now if we put that, add that play-by-play data, we've got a lot of information for every single row. What happened in the play, the probability of the Vikings winning, and who was all involved and all that kind of stuff. So remember we did the same kind of join in the previous video, and I said you have to make sure you join game ID to game ID and play ID to play ID, because both of these files are, each row is a play, and there's, in this case, there's multiple games, so you want to make sure you match the right play with the right game. And we're going to make a whole new data frame called probability here, or just prob, P-R-O-B. All right, so now what can we do? Let's just do a few fun things with this, this data before we make some charts from it. The first thing is I want to know if the Vikings won the game or not, just yes or no. And so remember I said the only thing in the data indicating who won is a 1 or a 0 in a column called home win. And so 1 means the home team won, and a 0 means the away team won. So I've got a case when statement here again, where I'm saying if the home team won and the home team name was the Vikings, then yes. If the home team did not win and the away team was the Vikings, then yes. And then I'm going to say, for all others, say no. This does not deal with ties, and you would have to add in another case when statement in order to deal with ties. I know there's no ties here in these 12 games, so I didn't add that in, but you could pretty easily. So I'm going to run this, and then we'll take a look at it. So we can now check. We should probably check, first thing you should do is check and make sure that all the rows got counted. Now, this kind of makes it look like the Vikings lost 338 games, but it's really 338 plays in the games where they're listed as not winning, and 1,799 plays in the games where they won. The key thing is that there's no indication here that there's blank rows that didn't get a value. So that's good. That worked. So let's ask it some questions and do a little fun analysis. So I want to know, how often were the Vikings the underdogs at halftime? So we know that there is a play type in here called end of half. Remember we talked about that? So I want to filter this data down to only the ones where it's at the end of the half, and I should note that this record only happens truly at halftime. The end of the second half is denoted with either end of game or end of regulation. So we're going to just have it pull a few pieces of information out and put it in a new data frame called Vikes halftime. And so if we quick view that data frame, you can see here that we have the play records, and you see it's second quarter, the clock says 0, which means it's the start of halftime, and we have their probability of winning the game, and then whether or not they did win the game, yes or no. And there's 12 rows here, 12 games so far this season. So now if I want to take that and you can eyeball 12 games pretty easy, but let's summarize that a little bit. I want to look at where how many games did the Vikings win, even though they had less than 50% chance as of halftime. So I'm going to only look at the records where the Vikings probability was, in this data set that we just created, is less than 0.5. And then we're going to count up how many wins or losses, and then what that is as a percentage. And of course this is going to be kind of tiny because of only 12 games, and it's actually less than that. So there's only one game where they had a 50% chance of winning at halftime that they actually won. And then there's 2 games, or they were less than 50% chance. There's 2 games that they lost, which are the 2 games. The Vikings are 10-2 right now. Those are the 2 games they lost. So not super interesting, but there is one kind of standout game there. Now, we could ask another question. I want to look at the 2-minute warning in the fourth quarter. So we can filter it down to just the plays, what was happening as of the 2-minute warning, with there's 2 minutes left to play. What was the Vikings' probability at that point? And you can see it's kind of all over the road on these games. And so let's do a similar summary that we just did above, but instead of, on the previous one, remember I made a data frame first of just the records that were at halftime. In this case, I'm just going to do it all on the fly with a filter. So we're going to say, let's use the probability table. Let's filter it to just the plays, those play records I care about, which is fourth quarter, 2-minute warning, and then let's say where the Vikings probability of winning was less than 90%. So they didn't have the game fully locked up at that point. And you can argue with me about where to put that. I've been debating 0.9, 0.8, 0.75. There's a bunch of different ways you could go, but they definitely didn't have the game locked up. So how many wins, how many losses in those situations, and what is that as a percentage of their game? So 6 wins, or 75% of the games where they were in that situation, they've won. And this is kind of the storyline of the Vikings this year. They've closed out some games that it looked like they might actually lose, and they actually won them. And here it is. All right, we're going to stop this video now, and the third video, we're going to use that probability data and make some cool charts that cover all the games in one swoop. Come back for more. Thank you.